with Vivek Sanil and Muriel Desar. Talk 100.3.
मंडे की सुबह 27 फरवरी 2 more days and then फरवरी गायब, लेकिन वैसे ही जून भी आ जाएगा और कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स जो है वो भी आ जाएगा और इस पे एवरी मंडेज एंड फ्राइडेज टैली सॉल्यूशंस ब्रिंग टू यू टॉक कंप्लायंस, जहाँ पे हम बात करते हैं, एक्सपर्ट्स को लेके आते हैं और आज हमारे साथ एक्सपर्ट है CA राजीव हीरा जी.
Right, and he's the managing partner at RHMC Management Consultants. Now, Rajiv has a high caliber in finance professional with an experience of leading roles in private and multinational financial institutions of over 25 years in the area of risk management, compliance, investment analysis, investment management, taxation, advisory, and management consulting as well. He's got an experience of working in Asia, Africa, and Middle East. Welcome to the show, Rajiv.
Thank you, Muriel. Thanks, Vivek.
थैंक यू. आज तो बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग डिस्कशन होने वाला है. आई थिंक एवरीथिंग जो हमें डे टू डे लाइफ में इफेक्ट भी होगा, बिकॉज बहुत लोग जो है वो हसल करते हैं, यानी अपना काम करते करते दूसरा काम भी करते हैं.
Absolutely, and we fall under the freelancers.
See, there is a vast definition on the freelancer. So as we move along, we'll talk a lot on that. There are freelancers who are registered in UAE. There are freelancers who are working. We call it moonlighting. So how we connect those, and UAE has never came up in the moonlighting concept.
Right.
Because of various reasons. So. I always say that freelancing is nothing wrong. It's always great because you're getting extra buck. But we have to connect with the law of the land also.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there are three broad factors which always gets and connected when we talk about a freelancer.
Right.
Point number one, are we registered to do what we are doing in the country?
Right.
Because law of the lands very clearly says if you're doing any business or a profession, you need to have a requisite licensing to operate that way. So there are a lot more which are getting talked from a regulatory perspective also. So they have clearly very recently stated a post which has come up. It's a few liner post but says a lot. It says that a freelancer will be subjected to corporate tax and the details will follow through. So that's what is the starting point. And I think this is the biggest space which comes as a compliance. A lot of time we connect with what about large corporates, what about small corporates, what about freelancers. I always say that large corporate have their own structure to take care of the compliance side.
Right.
Small corporates always connect with either accountant or a professionals to take and seek advice. May not be a full time, but they have someone in the framework.
Right.
But freelancer is little bit vulnerable. Because point number one, their revenues are not as great as we think through.
Right.
In some cases, yes, definitely. But largely, if I talk about, it's not as great as we talk through. And they don't have the ecosystem of compliance.
Right.
So how we can maybe look at educating them, look at bringing them on the discussion platform. It's not something right, wrong, but that's I think the objective of today's talk also we're going to come into.
वन एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इट, एक तो वो होता है फ्रीलांसर जो फुल टाइम फ्रीलांसिंग कर रहे हैं, और एक तो वो होता है कि फॉर एग्जांपल आप कहीं पे नौकरी भी कर रहे हो, पर ऑल्सो जैसे आपने मून लाइटिंग कहा कि आप दूसरी जगह भी कर रहे हो, सो आप ये परमिशन लेके करते हो फ्रॉम योर ऑर्गेनाइजर. बट मुझे डू आई नीड अ वर्क परमिट फॉर दैट एज वेल, कि अगर मैं एक्स्ट्रा काम कर रहा हूँ?
See, there are two things which comes into. Point number one, you take permission from your employer, which anyway is part of ethics and other things we sign it off.
Right.
But the second point which says from the UAE perspective is, do you have a work permit or a license to do the activity which you are conducting?
Okay.
So there are multiple things as I talked about. One, looking at, do I have a license to operate what I'm operating? Two, are this within the framework of multiple things which are coming in? AML CFT is one part. So I'll talk about those for a certain industry where it is becoming very, very, very prominent.
Okay.
And the third thing is what we do now as the taxes and other things are coming up. One simple question. Let's say if you are a freelancer, you have a full-time job, you're taken an NOC from your employer, and you're working now in the workspace, which is a freelance workspace. You're generating a revenue of 300,000, 400,000 dirhams.
Right.
What about the compliances?
No, but what I want to understand is, for example, if I've been employed by a particular firm and I'm only liable to them for those hours. उसके बाद मैं जो करती हूँ, that's, I mean, none of anyone's business rather. So why do I still need to have a freelancer's visa?
Perfect.
Or license even?
Perfect. So there are two parts. Point number one, as you rightly said, you're working for an employer.
Right.
So there is a very clear definition which comes on the tax side. Are you working as independent or a dependent?
Okay.
In this case, you are 100% dependent on the employer.
Because of
In
the
the first
visa,
scenario.
because of the...
अगर उनकी visa आप ना लो तो, if you're on your father's or husband's sponsorship, then
You will have a work permit.
right.
You will have a labor contract. So it's
Right.
perfectly fine to work on a issued visa, which may be a husband visa or a family visa, or maybe a golden visa now in this case.
Right.
So you need to have a work permit to operate. Because that's where your liabilities also comes and plays a different role. So if you're working for an organization, you get overarching liability framework also, that if something goes wrong on a high level, organization is in the front. Organization will take care of everything. So Muriel, as a very simple thing, you in the first category, when we talk about I'm working as an employee, the moment I work as an employee, I'm not an independent person.
Correct.
I am dependent on the organization, and all the income which I earn for and on behalf of organization is organization's income.
Right.
Right.
And whatever expenses I take it as a salary. That is why we are not paying VAT on salary also,
Right.
because that's not
Even
an
though it's an
independent income.
expense for the company.
Yeah, but it's not an independent income.
Independent
So the law
income.
says a business done independently. And the second category, the moment we talk about the evening time when we are doing a business, you are working as an independent person now.
Right.
So what happens if something goes wrong in that profession, in that business? Who is held liable for that? Is employer going to take that liability? Answer is technically no,
Right.
because that's your perspective, your risk taking, your business. So in that case, you're working as pure independent. Do we have a work permit, a license, a operations part to do that activity?
Right.
और रेलेवेंट होना चाहिए ना. फॉर एग्जांपल आप कुछ और मैनेजर का आपके पास परमिट है और आप कर कुछ और रहे हो, सो वो रेलेवेंसी भी इम्पोर्टेंट है.
See, I'll little bit of on this part I can maybe ignore out for on a larger extent. So I'll just give you a couple of examples which we have onboarded our clients also.
Okay.
Dubai Economic Department issues a license which does not carry a visa. It's a very simple social media expert you are. So you can take a license. It's a very economical license, not very expensive.
Okay.
So you're a dependent on your employer or your family. You can take a NOC and take that visa,
Right.
which is a very low cost visa. So here you have a permit to do what you're doing.
But what happens in cases of influencers, because they could be doing a manager's job during a day, but at night they're influencers. Now, again, an influencer's wage or the remunerations that you give them could range from products to physical cash, like physical products and cash. So how do they physical products and cash? So how do they fall under this ambit, and where do they go and register themselves?
So first, from a Dubai government perspective and even other Emirates also, they have very clearly said, if you are an influencer, you are coming on the social media, you need to be registered as an influencer.
Right.
So that's a
सबसे
first
basic
part.
है.
So that's a first part. That's what I said. All profession has very different dynamics, and we can maybe pick up couple of profession to get into that. So in this case, influencer is supposed to register. If he's an employee already working with, he need to register as an entity or a structure to take a license, which can be a freelance license also. He does not need to have employees. He may be working alone, which is perfectly fine. But if he's working with other employees, he wants to create a structure, then we are getting in not a freelance license. We are talking about a full structure entity or a
बिजनेस
company.
एक्टिविटी हो गया ना फिर
Correct.
तो, yeah.
Like 4-5 influencers together cannot,
starting a company, the
Yeah, because-
influencers of UAE, something like
Then
that.
it becomes a
because-
company.
Company.
because there are groups of influencers over here who are contemplating
But
to now
structural
start.
नहीं बनाया उन्होंने.
नहीं, they
Only on
because
WhatsApp. It's a group on WhatsApp.
they want to convert it into a structure, because now you need your licensing and everything in place as well.
So I'll give a very simple example. What happens? Let's a very very right example you picked up. If I have 5 influencers as part of the game, they would like to have some support system also. Someone does mixing, camera, audio,
Right,
all those things
right.
will come as a part of a structure.
Right.
You may have 5 people who are front end, but you may have a back end team of maybe 5, 6, 10 people depending on their volume and size. Now we are talking actually a structure. We are not talking a freelance kind of a thing. So
Okay.
this is a pure company which can be formed in various verticals from a UAE perspective. You can go to the free zone, you can go to the mainland. All those frameworks are there. But then I'll say that's not a freelancing activity now.
Correct. Then it's become a company, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Every Monday and Friday, Tally Solutions bring to you Talk Compliance, जहाँ पे Tally Compliance maestro जाते हैं और वो अपना expertise share करते हैं. और आज हमारे साथ है CA राजीव हीरा जी. It's the second time he's here in the studio, and it's always great to have him because the depth of knowledge he has and the simplicity, the way he explains, is phenomenal.
Yeah, so layman's language, like they say, like talking to us in our tone is something what Rajiv, you really are right now top notch with it, and you're talking to us about influencing, influencers. You're talking to us about freelance licensing and so much more. Something that we all maybe knowing unknowingly do it. We all want to be influencers, and everybody, every second person in the UAE is an influencer.
Just like DJs.
Every second person. So, and not realizing that now this is a full-time job. It requires you to be licensed. It requires you to be on par with, the law as well.
So first of all, Muriel and Vivek, I don't think I can say that every second person is an influencer.
Sorry, at least the people that we meet in our fraternity.
But everyone जो है social media पे डालते रहते हैं ना, so that's how.
Everybody.
Yeah.
No, that's 100% right. Like from looking at people like you, I think we get influenced. So that's where it is. Coming back to the topic line, like I'll say it's not a heavy cost framework, but yes, there is a compliance framework as part of it. There are licenses which are available, which does not require you to spend a plethora of money and a plethora of amount. But definitely there is a structure which has to be built up. So if you're an influencer, as we talked about, UAE government is looking at who influences, who does campaigning in the Facebook, in the other platform which are available. They want to control it. It's not a control on the difference aspect. It's a control to make sure that things are rightly said. People have some responsibilities when they are doing what they are doing. So looking at that part to start with, the licensing requirement starts from there. And once the licensing requirement starts, you have a lot of free zones which are giving those kind of licenses. And to be honest, it doesn't cost as bomb as we think through. So Dubai mainland also has some licenses attached to it. So every free zone, every Emirates has those licenses. So that's the first part, I will say, get ourselves rightly accredited so that we don't get into a trouble. So normally what happens, when things are right, no one asks you. But when things goes wrong, then definitely the question comes up, who authorizes to do this, do this, and the plethora of other blames and other things comes up too.
Right. So Rajiv, let's refresh our memories on requirements or licensing requirements in terms of normal people. If we want to get into it, what is it that we require? What are the requirements like?
So since you are working as an employee, there are two parts. Point number one, you need an NOC from your employer. And there is a very clear license, trade license or a professional license, which I talk about. In this case, a professional license, which help you to conduct a business on a regular basis in UAE. That's a very simple thing which comes into. And then you have to monitor your transactions. You have to monitor your activity, what you are doing. So as I said, if the remuneration on account of a freelancing or the separate license goes beyond 375,000 dirhams, let's talk about. It's not a very big deal.
But it's the same for everyone. Multinationals ho, bade companies ho, सबके लिए it is the same. The slab is the same.
So I'm using first the VAT concept, because in VAT you need to have a top line, which is a turnover or professional fees earned of 375,000. If you have received that, you are by default mandatorily required to register. So as I said, one is licensing compliance. Second is the VAT compliance, which is coming up. And the third thing is corporate tax, which we see as the things progress into.
But 375,000, this figure, where did this figure come up from?
This comes from a VAT law, which very clearly says it has two thresholds. One is a voluntary registration. If you want to register yourself, 187,500, and there is a mandatory registration. So 375,000 is mandatory. You don't have a choice then. So if you are churning out a professional income, a business of 375,000, you are mandatorily required to register. Otherwise, it's a non-compliance.
And as a freelancer, you are subject to corporate tax now. Now, what happens after that?
So I'll take a step back. Now we have seen from the influencer side. Now let's look at the employer side.
Okay.
Or the person who hires the influencers.
Right.
So a lot of time, like we do events. So sometimes we get greedy. Like, why don't we call a student who is practicing on a photography, and we pay a decent amount, which is good for his pocket money, which is technically lower than the market rate.
Right.
So if I hire those people who does not have a license to operate, will corporate tax allow me to take this as an expense or not?
Nice.
So that's a first point, because I am not dealing with someone who has a legitimate business in UAE.
Correct.
So because he's not going to give me a license, he's not going to give me a invoice,
Right.
which is registered in UAE.
Invoice तो बन जाएगा.
But it is not
लेकिन
registered in
नहीं
UAE.
है. So what's the point? You
So
can't use it as an expense.
Correct. So in this case, the payment which I am giving, I am even not able to claim that as an expense.
Right.
So it's not one-sided. It's a double-sided sword which is coming up.
Nice.
So corporate tax, yes, it is applicable if you earn a final income of more than 375,000. I think largely we don't need to worry about that, because there is something called small business relief, which is going to come up from a
Right.
corporate tax perspective.
Right.
I'm not saying we are required to pay a corporate tax, but we need to look at a compliance side first. Corporate tax will only come when my final income
Correct.
is more than 375,000.
Right.
We're not talking top line now. So there are two elements which we need to look at.
But then
VAT,
yeah. Sorry,
VAT
but
talks about top line, and corporate tax talks about income.
now,
Yeah, right.
as a freelancer, I don't have my books of accounts. I'm an individual. And chalo, मैंने कितना भी, for example, I reached 375. I have never maintained book of accounts.
I'll go a step back now in this again. So to make little bit more clear, since you are working as an employee, now this is little dangerous thing which comes on the table.
Nice.
So since you are working as an employee and you don't have a personal structure or
Correct.
identity,
Yeah.
should I not club all the income which you earned in your employer income?
Amazing. Oh ho. Salary भी आ गया उसमें.
So, and now, since these may be professional incomes which are earned, we may not have paid VAT on that, because your employer anyway is registered for VAT.
Right.
So we are getting into a lot of non-compliances. So we are giving advice on employer side also. Make sure you have a very clear disclosure from each employee
Right.
that I'm not earning anything outside. And if I earn, I'll come back to you and take a NOC and create my structure. So all those comes as part of a job joining formalities, which technically are there. A lot of time we miss it. So as an employer, maybe they have taken out their liability, but yes, if they know, there can be a double whammy on that.
So Tally Solutions is a perfect platform कि अगर आपने books of accounts अभी तक maintain नहीं किए हैं, then you can really log on to their website, and बहुत ही amazing blockbuster products तो है ही, and it's very user friendly also.
Right. Also, Rajiv, what do you say about deposits that you make through, in your bank, the income that you make on the deposits in your bank? Will that be subject to corporate tax as well?
See, from a corporate tax perspective, 2-3 things comes into. Point number one, whether I'm making an income as a business or not. So if an individual has a corporate deposit account and they earn interest, all those things are subjected to non-corporate tax. So they will be out of the preview because the individual is earning out of that. So that will go off. But since the deposit is in the corporate name, the answers may have a very different view on that.
We got a question. Good morning, Rajiv ji. Can sales and marketing professionals be freelance professionals?
There are various free zones. We need to look at which free zone you want to be into, and there are activities which are designed in that. Yes, you can be a freelancer. There are single person company, there are single person visa company. All those are applicable. And as I talk about on a broad level, Raki's, which is Russell Khema free zone provides that.
Okay.
Dubai mainland companies have that kind of a licensing. So yes, but you need to look at which free zone you want to opt for. And there are a list of activities which you can register as a freelancer.
And moving forward, could you please talk to us about how will UAE corporate tax regime apply to partnerships now?
See, from a partnership perspective, there are two things which are being mentioned in the law. So both the partners, let's say there are two partners who have a partnership agreement. So the law ignores the partnership agreement and treats the individual as a separate people to act and give a all the tax compliances at an individual level, unless they apply to the authority and ask for that this partnership together. We want to go for a corporate tax assessment. So again, going back to the point we referred to, if influencers are there, 4 or 5, it's again a unincorporated partnership per se.
Right.
So you need to look at whether you want to use as a structure or you want to assess everyone as an individual. But individual assessment, I feel, will be pretty complicated on account of apportionment of income, apportionment of expenses, because you have common resources
Right.
you are deploying into. So that's where it comes into.
इनफैक्ट इंडिविजुअल की अगर आप बात करें कि फ्रीलांसर्स थ्रेशोल्ड 375,000, बट ऑल्सो पर्सनल इनकम हमारा टैक्स नहीं होगा. फॉर एग्जांपल बैंक डिपॉजिट से मेरे एज एन इंडिविजुअल, will I be subject to UAE corporate tax?
No, bank deposits will not be, investments will not be. So all those things will be out of the preview from a corporate tax perspective. But a lot of time investments we think as an open investment. So what about forward contracts, option trading?
हाँ, जैसे
So,
नेशनल बॉन्ड्स में अगर आपने इन्वेस्ट किया तो
National bonds is still an
Still okay,
investment
deposit
because
ही
you
है.
have taken a possession of the bonds. So what about you're not taking a possession of the security? You're doing a forward transaction. You're taking an option transaction.
ओके.
So in that case, a lot of jurisdiction consider it to be a business. So it may fall back into the business category,
Okay.
and the compliances from a corporate tax may come up in that space. We will still wait for the more answers, more decisions from cabinet perspective to see how this will span out.
एंड ऑल्सो थोड़ी देर पहले आपने मेंशन किया था अबाउट अनइनकॉर्पोरेटेड पार्टनरशिप. फॉर एग्जांपल आप 5
Right.
लोग मिलके कुछ कर रहे हैं
Right.
और एक एस्टैब्लिशमेंट आपने नहीं बनाया है, बट देन यू आर ऑल वर्किंग. नाउ विल दे बी रिक्वायर्ड टू रजिस्टर एंड फाइल अ UAE corporate tax return as well?
Definitely from a corporate tax perspective, because law has referred not only registered entities, they have talked about unincorporated partnerships, structures, and all that. So the very typical example for unincorporated partnership is having a property.
Right.
You take a full building with 5 or 6 people and you kept it on rent. So now you don't need from any law perspective that all 5 people should register as company.
Right.
So you can have individual as part of the shareholders or owners of the property.
Okay.
But it's a joint property. Now we can refer this also as one of the case study for unincorporated partnership.
Amazing.
Right.
Amazing.
So when you're talking about unincorporated partnership, now will these be required to register and file a corporate
उसी के
tax
बारे में
return?
सीए राजीव हीरा ने अभी बताया. एंड इसी पे एक पूछना चाहेंगे अबाउट दिस कॉन्सेप्ट इज वेल, अबाउट दिस अनइनकॉर्पोरेटेड पार्टनरशिप. अगर इसके बारे में इफ यू कुड एक्सप्लेन व्हाट आर दीज एंटिटीज. जैसे एक हमने इन्फ्लुएंसर्स का लिया, जैसे बिल्डिंग ओनर्स हमने किया, एंड देयर आर मेनी मोर लाइक दीज.
See, there can be registered corporate entities also. Example, let's say 2 large corporates.
Okay.
They want to bid for a joint project.
ओके.
Now, in this case, you make a tri-party agreement between the 2 bidders and the person for whom you are doing a work. So technically speaking, these 2 companies also are forming a partnership, which doesn't have a legal structure.
Right.
But as a contract, you may. So I may have a expertise on X activity,
Right.
and you may have an expertise on Y. So someone is looking at X and Y together.
That would be a business activity.
Correct. So in this case,
Right.
even corporates can have an unincorporated partnership.
Nice.
But the law says when you have an unincorporated partnership, you filter, ignore the partnership aspect, bring all the incomes to the respective owners. So in this case, corporate also. So that also plays one of the example or a role in that.
Right. Rajiv, if you could break this down for us, what is business or business activity so that we can get a better understanding?
Perfect. I think the business is, from a law perspective, something which is done on a continuous basis
Huh.
by an independent person. That's where it constitutes to a business. Now, this is why I was differentiating between employee and a freelancer activity. Because when we are working as an employee, we are not independent. We are working for and on behalf of organization.
Correct.
So whatever decision we take, we are taking for and on behalf of organization. These are not our personal decisions, whether we like it or not.
Right.
So all the structures, all the decision making, all the actions are not independent. So the first, I'll give you one typical example, which is quite interesting stuff. So I have repeated in a couple of my previous sessions also, but I think it's very important.
Now, before we went on a break, Rajiv was trying to break down what business and what business activity is. But before that, we actually have a voice note. Let's play
A
that.
question, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mohammad Wajiuddin, and I'm working as IT professional. Do I need NOC from my current employer to do any online business like Amazon seller account? Or if I want to invest as a partner with my friend in his business, so do I need a license or an NOC from my current employer, or can you explain that?
जी राजीव जी.
Perfect. I think the very, very valid point. Here, I'll just go back to the very basics. Point number one, yes, you require an NOC because when you signed a contract, you referred to that I'll be full-time employee and I'll not be working anywhere else. So that's the one part. I'm sure whichever organization you're working, a lot of time they have separate employee contracts apart from ministry contracts. So look at that. I can say we have not seen any agreement from the employer perspective which allows you to work anywhere and anytime. So I'm sure that's being tagged as a part of employer contract also, and the ministry's agreement which we sign from a Ministry of Labor perspective covers that.
Right. और बिजनेस और बिजनेस एक्टिविटी की हम बात कर रहे थे, उस पे अगर थोड़ा और
I'll give two broad examples to maybe quickly differentiate between what is business and what is not. I just take a simple use case. I woke up in the morning. I was scanning my mobile phone. I went to an e-commerce platform to buy a car.
right.
We don't have someone who is influencing us to give the brand name, so we're not taking anyone. Otherwise, we would have taken that. So I went and was searching some vehicles, and suddenly I found a nice, superb car. According to my taste, and found it to be available on the second-hand market for 100,000 dirhams.
Right.
I quickly picked that, and that's for the discussion had with the employer, with the owner of the car, and he said, Rajiv, no problem, transfer $5,000 to me right now.
Yeah.
So
A
I'll
token
just
amount.
block the car. Perfect.
Okay.
That's a token amount.
Yeah.
So I blocked the car and I said, give me 3 days. So we will exchange balance money and we'll go to RTA and get it transferred.
Right.
So that's a one part which happened. After third day, I went, got an RTA transfer. Point is over. On the fourth day, after the RTA transfer has happened, I was sitting with Vivek, and Vivek said, Rajiv, this is the car I was searching for long. Why don't you sell it to me? Now the car is already being transferred through RTA in Rajiv's name, my name, and I'm sending it to Vivek. We went to RTA, transferred the vehicle to Vivek, and this is perfectly fine. This is one case scenario. Now I'll go back to the similar case, but I'll just change a couple of situations. In the first case, just to remind myself and you all also, I went to RTA, got transferred the vehicle in my name, and after that only I sold the vehicle.
Correct.
Now in the other scenario, what happened? I booked the vehicle, paid 5,000, similar situation, everything same. But before I could go to the RTA to get the vehicle transferred in my name, Vivek said, Rajiv, why don't you sell this vehicle? And I took the seller and Vivek to the RTA department. Seller transferred the vehicle directly to Vivek. I pocketed in turn 50,000 in my pocket.
Correct.
So 100,000 purchased, 150 sold. Now in the second case, if you see, the ownership is never transferred in my name. So I never took an asset in my name. So I cannot call it a personal effect.
Right.
But in the second case, what happened is, in this case, I have done a trade. So I have earned a commission in this activity, and hence this is business.
Wow.
So both same transactions, everything is same. In the first case, I took a delivery, called it a personal effect, and then sold it. Perfectly fine. Not required to look at a corporate tax. But in the second case, definitely I have not taken a delivery and earned a commission or a referral or a gap or a profit, whatever name we call it.
Right.
So it's a business.
Right.
So now it's a very thin line which comes between the business and the personal effect in the case of a natural person, very clearly.
So if you're not registered, you need to register and you need to have a proper license for this.
Imagine I'm doing this for a regular
Income.
and I'm earning 50,000, 60,000
So one
every
off आपने
month.
कर दिया तो you won't be under the scanner.
I'll say still it is a business.
Okay.
But one-off still can be looked at because maybe the value is not there. The things are perfectly fine.
Nice.
But that it goes into a very
I think
different sector.
brilliant explanation.
I know.
था
I mean,
यार,
it
ये
was
तो
so easy to understand, easy
याद
on the ears
रहेगा.
as well.
याद
मुझे भी
रहेगा.
याद रहेगी. What about holding property jointly by individuals? Now, is this considered as partnership business, and will this be subject to tax?
See, property is still under deliberation right now as we talk about.
Right.
Just to give you a perspective, when the public consultation document came, there is a clear statement that real estate will be out of the preview from a natural person perspective.
Okay.
But when the law came, that point was missing out. So there are two things which we have to roll back and look at a logical point. Neutrality is one concept which corporate tax applies. That means if there is an income by a corporate or an individual, we will take both of them as a neutral and put a effective taxation. So point number one, we are not 100% clear right now whether the real estate will be subjected to tax.
Okay.
Now this is my personal view or opinion coming up.
Right.
What we hear, what we understand, it looks like they will give some exemption. Maybe one property can be investment. Beyond that, come as a corporate tax.
Okay.
From an individual perspective also. Now coming back to your question, 4 or 5 people have jointly owned the property. What we call it, this is an unincorporated partnership technically.
Okay.
So that means we will eliminate the corporate structure unless there is a special approval taken. Then all individuals will be individually responsible for the share of income and the share of expenses they can claim from a corporate tax perspective, if real estate comes as part of an ambit from a corporate tax perspective.
And very interesting, आपने real estate के बारे में कहा, lot of businesses, not only real estate, they also work on commission as well. I mean, or as an employee, as a salaried employee. So, वो 375,000 पहुंचा, and you do get great bonuses, and so that will not be under the.
Your bonus is
Because
basically
it is-
any industry for that matter.
Bonus as an employer-employee relationship is
It's all
out
right.
of the corporate tax. But let's take a very practical example. I'm working with a high net worth individuals as a part of a bank, or I have a social network.
Nice.
Now what I do, I just catch up with people and they say, Rajiv, I want to buy a property, and I call my friend. Why don't you entertain him and take care of his needs? And when the needs were fulfilled, they call me back, Rajiv, we earned the business out of it. We want to give you some referral income.
Nice.
Now, in this case, referral income technically becomes a business. And as
Because you're doing this regularly.
correct. And I said it's on a both side, not only at my side, because as a Rajiv, it's also from the real estate broking firm or a real estate firm who has paid the money.
Correct.
They will not be able to claim if I am not registered as in the capacity to give a license that okay, I can earn a commission. And even from my perspective, I need to look at individually if I am working as a freelancer without a license, whether I'm breaching the VAT threshold, whether I'm going to be part of a corporate tax or not, everything comes as part of it.
Kya
And the
baat.
bigger part, which is what I missed out to even add on here.
Okay.
Real estate dealing is in a very high influence or within the ambit of anti-money laundering and countering terrorism financing. So in this case, I may not be complying to some of the principles required from a AML CFT perspective also. That means doing a due diligence of the people who I'm introducing. I don't have a license even from the real estate perspective. So RERA compliance also comes as part of it. So I need to look at the whole holistic picture and match all the dots before getting at that commission income.
Wow, मतलब ये
Right.
तो
My God,
बहुत
this
ही
is
ज़्यादा
massive,
ज़रूरी है
yeah.
for anyone, because we've seen that, we've noticed that this is quite, हो जाता है कभी कभार, yeah.
Referral, I think referral fees is a terminology that we're all familiar with, but now that if this is going to be
So referral
familiar with, but now that if this is going to be
So referral is
falling
also
under-
professional income with any
Professional income.
sense.
Right.
You
what
have done
about
something.
introduction fees? Now, what kind of licensing would they require? And
So it can be a consulting license. It can be a something in that similar fashion, because you are doing something for the sake of something. It's not
Right.
that you are doing a charity. If the referral is pure for non-commercial reasons, perfectly fine. But if it's a commercial reason, then there is a business.
So I think freelancers, this is something for you. This is for you so that you are well, you're up to speed with all the information and all the laws that the land has been producing day in and day out. What kind of future amendments or what kind of future implications would we see with the corporate tax, where the corporate tax is concerned rather?
See, I will just give a very simple perspective. We have to match all the dots which are happening from a country perspective. Let's ignore UAE for a time being. So we have seen in other markets. So what happens if someone gets caught off in doing one illegal activity, the other agencies also come and grab on that attention.
Acha.
It's a very simple thing which we have seen. So
Okay.
if someone is caught for smuggling, suddenly the sales tax or a GST people come and grab on them. Customs, excise people come and grab on them. FEMA regulations, Foreign Exchange Management Act comes and grab on them. So it's not one point which is missed out. And suddenly you will find, oh, there are 10 agencies behind me now for one act.
Right.
Right? It's a one act, but it has a linkages to all the 10 agencies. And that's what we need to be clearly watchful of where we are getting into.
So very subtly, you've said a lot of things, Rajiv.
Right.
But at the start of a conversation, you did mention about moonlighting. What is lightning that we're talking about?
So very simple thing which we talk about, which we were just talking in the framework where I work as an employee and I do some part-time job which is not within the framework time and other things from a employee-employee relationship perspective. So that's what also was a talk of town in a lot of tech industry especially, where they say if I am working my 8 or 9 hour shift and after that what I do should not make a difference.
Right.
There are pros and cons, there are plus and minus discussions, so I'm not getting into what is right and wrong.
Right.
But we need to look at from a UAE perspective, do I have a requisite licensing to do? Point number one, it starts with the NOC from the employer.
Right.
And second, creating a structure for what I do. So you are technically doing a consultancy. If let's say you are into IT provider, you are providing IT services. So all those things has to be looked at from a compliance perspective. Do I have the license to receive that money? Do I have a professional activity to conduct and get my remuneration in a right way?
Right.
So that's where the whole gambit of things comes into. So touch all the dots, match all the principles, and see we are not off track into any activity out of this.
Right. For example, अगर मैं कहीं पे काम कर रहा हूँ as an employee and I'm also working बाहर and I don't have any license, so will there be any implication on my current employer?
Both ways. So as I said, your employer, if technically speaking, you don't have any independent structure right now. You are still dependent on the employer.
So employer पे कुछ नहीं होगा.
one level, employer may also be influenced or stating that this is an income which you have allowed your employee to earn outside,
Right.
and you have not. If you are given a no objection, then that's also a problem. Why should not I club that income which a employee has earned as a freelancer in
Right.
your category itself?
Correct, yeah. But the one who has employed the freelancer, उनके लिए तो definitely होगा possible only if you're doing it with a licensed
Correct.
person.
Right. So when you're picking up these licenses, for example, I could be an engineer at day and in the night I could be something else, or I could be a content writer for
DJ.
even. Content writer even. What kind of, should the job that I pick up or should the license that I pick up be in lieu to my original job or to my profession that's on the pataka, like they call it?
To the profession which you are doing. So
it can't vary.
Correct. So example, if I am, we are a consultant, full-time consultant, we have our own advisory firm. But if I take a choice of
Radio jockeying.
catching up with you as a radio jockey in a professional form.
Right.
So I do my own stuff. So then definitely I need to have either social media influencer or the media person in that category to get the license for. It has to commensurate with the activity we do.
Oh, this
Also,
would be...
this happens a lot, a lot of
Yeah.
people, for example, bankers है क्या, I am a business owner, let's say, लेकिन my dad's business, let's say, and मैं काम कर रहा हूँ वहाँ पे दिन भर. One day in a week, I also DJ as well.
Correct.
So,
I know
as
so
a
many.
lot of people do
I
this
know
or
so
different
many.
things.
So
you have to have a license.
I'll give you a very simple thing. So there are, we don't have to complicate every steps. Point number one, if I already have an employer-employee relationship, I can create one more part-time employer-employee relationship also,
Okay.
rather than getting into an independent space.
Okay.
So in this case, I am employed with two organizations. The other organization will take care of everything. I'll get my salary.
Right.
So I'm getting salary from two places. So I'm saying it's not that every time a freelancer need to take a visa, a license requirement, he can or she can be part of the other entity as a part-time employee also.
Correct, yeah.
So if you're working with your father, business example, perfectly fine. You can join as a part-time employee. So that's also a possibility to be looked at.
Superb. And I'm sure there is a lot of, options for you to look at tallysolutions.com as well. And Rajiv ji, if you could tell us a little bit about Tally Solutions in terms of, how they can make hum sabki life a little more easier, especially for freelancers and for everyone who is hustling and doing 2-3 other jobs.
So as I was talking about before also, so a lot of time there are small transactions, small activities we keep conducting.
Right.
And imagine I've prepared something, kept in my mind. How will I remember after 3 days, 4 days or 4 years?
Right.
So we have to keep it for a long period. So you need a structure. You need something where you can record your transactions. You can have your trial balance, P&L, balance sheet ready. If you don't need it for a regular basis also. So I think Tally provides economic solutions. They have various platforms to be looked at. And I think that's where recording, safekeeping the records, and even able to access it after a couple of years makes it really doable.
Right. So tallysolutions.com, that's the website जहाँ पे आप जा सकते हैं. And आज इतने सारे discussions में one thing which really attracted us was कि moonlighting basically.
Moonlighting. I was very interested by the concept. I mean, we've heard it before. We've played
it's
a couple of
important to
bites.
have an NOC from
Yeah.
your company, and then जो भी आप income कमा रहे हो बाहर उसका registration, यानी कि in terms of कि आपने maintain किया है.
What are the
And Tally
repercussions
Solutions
of
can do
not
that.
having an NOC? I mean, if you don't, people who don't have an NOC and still continue doing what they're doing because they feel that they're not reaching that threshold. So why bother now?
So not reaching a threshold is one part. Doing a business which you are not allowed to be doing in the country is the prime most important thing.
Right.
So as I said, if things goes right, no one asks you. If things goes wrong, that's where the story starts in.
True.
So we have seen where something goes wrong in that event, and some wrong statement came up by someone, and suddenly you will see the agencies coming back and referring to, hello, this person never had even a license to do this thing. An employer will suddenly wash out. So all those personal implications are going to be quite heavy, and we need to be watchful on that.
Right. And Rajiv ji has around 25 plus years in the area of risk management, compliance, investment analysis, investment management, and fantastic, phenomenal expertise है आपका in the subject as well. How are you going to see this in terms of कि अब जब से जून से होगा, a lot of people are preparing, a lot of awareness हम gather कर रहे हैं. How do you see it unfolding, the corporate tax?
See, a lot of actions, I will say, are required from a UAE perspective. I'll talk about even large corporates also. It's not only influencers, it's not only small enterprises, even large corporates. We were never familiar about how the tax accounting has to be done.
Right.
So it goes to as basic as getting prepared for the tax accounting, getting prepared for parallel books on how you transact and how you pay taxes. So when I say parallel books, it doesn't mean fake books. It means books to translate from a law perspective what is allowed, what is not allowed, and finally pay taxes on what is as per the legal framework. Transfer pricing is playing an important role. You have conducted some sessions on that part also.
Right.
Because if I'm dealing with someone, I need to make sure that these are fair and transparent practices.
Right.
I think I keep re-emphasizing this law is not coming only for revenue collection. There is a very big angle on the compliance which is being washed through. So BEPS, which is base erosion profit shifting, is one of the bigger impact which we'll see. So it's not only with the people, with not only the country, it's going to be cross-country changes which you're going to see it up.
Brilliant.
Right, and before we end this great conversation with you, I want to also ask you. A lot of people are baffled right now with corporate tax coming in. I know we've been trying to do this week on week, but for all of them who are listening in, or maybe the family owners, business run owners who have no idea of how to come about with all their bookkeeping and everything that they have in place, what is that kind of advice you'd like to give them? How would you want them to structure themselves for the corporate tax?
So I think we are not required to be worried about. We need to be prepared. So one of the things which I keep referring is keep attending as much as sessions and let your finance people be in those meetings and session and call back to you if you are running a large corporate also. So we as an entity, we have taken a KHDA license to be we are approved from KHDA perspective to undertake corporate training sessions also and classes. So we are making sure that the CFOs, the finance heads are really equipped. So it's always good to connect on these kind of a social media platforms, learn what's happening,
Right.
talk to people, be attentive to the ministry's decision, seminars, sessions which are coming up. So I think that we need to be prepared, not to be worried about. 9% is not a big amount.
Right.
If I just take in the holistic view, as we referred in previous session also, if I just talk about from a country perspective, this won't even cost a 2% of the total income we are talking about,
Right.
because there are incomes which are exempt, there are incomes which are not going to be taxed. So in overall, the tax impact is not more than 2% is what we are referring to.
Wow.
But the compliance is the bigger stuff.
And when we hear 9% or up 2%,
And two,
कितना
it
अच्छा लग रहा है
sounds-
सुन के.
Really?
Rajiv ji, you've been amazing in terms of explanation. Please keep coming to our studios, and a big thank you to Tally Solutions to get you as well. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. We'll see you soon, Rajiv ji. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vivek. Thanks, Mirel.
You're welcome.